There are lots of reasons why people read. Sometimes you read to learn a language, or you read simply because you enjoy it. But other times we read because we need to. And sometimes there's a lot of information to get through. And if there are things you can do to help you read faster, then they would be useful to know. So if you are in a situation where you need to read a lot of information, this video is for people like you. In this video, I'm going to give you 8 tips on how to make your reading faster without reducing the quality of your reading. So tip number 1 is read for specific information. If you have a lot of reading to do, it's probably because you need to know certain things. You don't necessarily need to understand every single word that's written on the page. If this is your situation, then before you read, write down or in your mind take a note of the things that you need to know from this book or from this article, from these documents. And then when you read, don't worry about understanding everything about the text. Simply look for those words you need, look for those phrases, look for the information you need, and that will cut your reading time down a lot and make it more useful time spent. My second tip is read for the main points. This is different to reading for specific information. Maybe there are situations where you have a long book or article to read, and really what you're trying to do is get a general understanding of what they are trying to say. Again, in this case, you don't need to read everything to do that. Or should I say, you don't have to understand everything to do that. What you want is by the end of your reading, you understand the main points. It's useful to remember that most texts, especially long ones, are organised in a way that give you lots of clues about the main points of the text, and they do that many times. In the first paragraph of a text, you'll often find all of the key information listed there. Then, of course, the conclusion does the same thing. But also, in the main part of the text, good writing often begins paragraphs with what's called a topic sentence. That is a sentence that tells you what is going to happen in that particular paragraph. And this is so useful because what you can do is you can read the topic sentence, decide if it's important for you. If it's not, you might, not always, but you might be able to leave that paragraph and go to the next paragraph and just find the paragraphs that you really need to understand. The second thing here is keywords. In most texts, there will be particular keywords that are repeated again and again and again. If a word is repeated, it's likely to be important, and you need to know what that means. So look out for the keywords, use the introduction, use the conclusion, or whatever comes at the beginning, what comes at the end, and look at the first sentence of each paragraph, and that will speed up your reading. If you need to then read in more detail, do so, but only do so in the parts where you really have to. My third point is read in chunks. What do I mean by read in chunks? Chunks is this idea that language is not normally contained in individual words, but in groups of words. Meanings are contained in groups of words. Certain words often happen together. For example, at the start of a story, a children's story, we often have this phrase, once upon a time. Now, this phrase does not need you to go to the dictionary and understand what the word once is, and upon, and and time. The phrase works as one. It basically means a long time ago. And language often works in that way, and it can speed up your reading if you think about language as being chunks rather than individual words. So when you read, try and take in several words at a time rather than one. And you'll find if you train yourself, you'll find your brain can actually take in more than one word at a time when it's reading, if you read in chunks. Point 4. Skip words you don't need. Now, this is a difficult one, and it may seem illogical at first, but it depends on the purpose of your reading. If the point of your reading is to learn language, then perhaps you shouldn't skip too many words. You do need to learn some words. But if the purpose of your reading is not to learn language, then you can make decisions about which words you really need to know and which words you don't. Even for a native speaker of English, in a long 3 or 4 page text, sometimes there will be 1 or 2 words that the native speaker doesn't know. But it's not always necessary to find out what it means, because that word may not be important to the meaning of the whole text. You need to decide, do you really need to know the meaning of every single word in a text? You may then ask me, well, how do I know if it's important or not, if I don't know what it means? It's a good question, but there are some ways of deciding, and that is to do with volume of words. If a word comes up repeatedly in a text, or a word that looks very similar, and you don't know it, then you probably have to find out what it is. If a word is repeated several times, it's probably important. But if a word just appears once and it doesn't seem that it's likely to contradict the meaning of the rest of the text, you can probably skip it for now if you need to read faster and get through your reading quickly. Point 5 is a practical tip. And this is white card under the line. By line, I mean a line of writing. If you put a white card under the line of text that you're reading, it helps the brain and the eyes to focus upon that line. It's just a little aid to stop you being distracted by the words coming afterwards, or skipping ahead with your reading and then realising you haven't read the previous line properly. Because something we can do sometimes, especially if you have a low attention span, is it can be tempting to go ahead in the reading too quickly without taking the words you really need to in. And then the problem is that slows you down, because then you have to keep rereading it. You have to keep going back to previous lines. So a bit of white card under a line of text will just give you an extra help to focus on that line, and that will help you get it through it faster. Point 6 is brainstorm the title. What do I mean by brainstorm? Brainstorm means come up with any ideas you can about something. So what you do here is before you read a text, you look at the title and you imagine everything that the title could possibly be referring to, or anything that you think could come up in the text as a result of the title. Now, this may seem a waste of time. You may think, well, why don't I just get straight into reading the text? But in a very long text, this can be useful, because as you are thinking about what the title might be about, you're actually preparing your mind for the information that will come to you. And that will make it come to you quicker. It will put what you read into context, and that helps you to have an understanding of the whole text rather than just bits and pieces. It's another way of focusing your mind as you read. There is nothing like having a question to answer to help you concentrate on anything, whether that's listening to a lecture or reading text in a book. So brainstorm the title, take a few seconds before you read, and it will save you time as you read. Point 7 is time yourself. So in this one, again, you are doing something to force yourself or motivate yourself to read faster. It's useful just to have little things going on that help you with the process. And what you could do is have one page of text and time yourself and say, I want to read it within this amount of time. Or possibly time yourself and say, I want to read it faster than I read the page before. You have to be a bit careful with this one. You need to be sure that you're not going to miss the main meaning if that's what you're reading for, or missing specific information if that's what you're reading for. But if you time yourself, you will be motivating yourself to read more quickly because you want to beat your time. And also it will keep training you to get better and better and better at reading faster. And that leads to my final point, which of course is the most important one of all, which is practice. If you want to get faster at reading, you need to do more reading. The more reading you do, the easier it will become, the less of a headache it will become. And then when you get to the day where you do need to read a long text, you've already had some training. So all of these 8 points are really good to help you read faster. But the last one is, of course, the best one. Keep practicing. Keep going. Don't get up. You will get better. You will get there.